building some workflows. So things that you can take back to your organization and things that you can start implementing. So we're going to give you some tools and some strategies to actually take away today. So it's very much, it's your session. So please just throw any questions out at any point. Very much want to make sure that we actually do cover up on as many of your issues as we possibly can. Okay. So I thought what I would do is actually start off talking about the process of change, because not everybody loves change. If you ask most people in real estate, they would say that property managers don't like change. And in my experience, people don't like change if they don't understand what the benefit of the change actually is. So we certainly see in a lot of cases, we will actually see people that perhaps if you're going through an acquisition, which I've done many of those over time, and you're going through an acquisition and you get all these clients that decide that they want to unplug when the acquisition is going through. And it took me ages to understand this, because I'm like, well, hang on a minute. You're already moving from agency A to agency B. You don't know agency B, but you are choosing to walk away and go to somebody else that you don't know. So how is it any different? What I grew to understand is that the clients who decided to do that felt that the change was happening to them. They felt like they had no control over it, no involvement in it. No one communicated it to them. And that is the most important part of any change process, is really strong, clear communication. So those kind of acquisitions, that's what we refer to as forced change. So it's something that you have absolutely no control over, and it's something that someone says, here is the change, we're going to throw it at you, go for it. So does anyone have an example of, another example of forced change? So what we look at as being something that a change process that was being forced on you. Sorry? Legislation. Thank you. Exactly right. So there's a classic example of something that's being forced on us. It's absolutely forced change. Forced change, a similar event in my own personal environment. I was working for an organisation. They decided to sell their rent roll. They sold it to another company, and that company already had a department head, so they didn't need another one. So that was change that was forced onto me in my life, because suddenly where I was working and what my role was, I had no control over the fact that that was changed. But then there is also the opposite of that, which is your chosen change. So we've discovered what forced change is. Who can give me an example of chosen change? I'm going to look back at you again. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, absolutely. Change of your job role, really. There's all sorts of things that, changing your relationship, changing all kinds of things that is something that you openly elect to do. So what I'd like you to do now is just have a chat in groups of like 2 or 3 or 4, however many, you're in your row. And just have a chat about things that have changed for you, perhaps in the last kind of 5 to 10 years. So we're giving you a fairly extensive scope there. So just have a chat about it and maybe just write a few things down. So share between yourselves exactly what has changed for you over these past years. Okay, fantastic. I'll spill on. Huh? Well, my back on? I am. Yay. Okay. While you're doing that, can I ask you all? I hate interrupting while you're all talking like this, but I just need you to do one little bit in. Once you've had that conversation, now I want you to reverse it, talk with the person again, and talk about whether you would go back. Would you actually reverse that change? Would you go back to where you are beforehand? Or have you worked out that where you are now, are you happier where you are now? Is it a better outcome where you are now? Would you prefer to go back? Let's just talk about that for a few minutes. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Have we gone? Yeah. Oh, okay. That'll do it. Oh, that's such a good one, isn't it? What is it? Force change? Oh my God, yeah. Yeah. But also being told that I have no civil liberty. You had to stay home and you had to be home before, what was it, 8:30, 9 o'clock or something? And the thing that always used to get me was when you had to wear your mask when you were outside. Like, I'm in the fresh air. Social distancing. Why do I have to wear a mask? Still do that. It's so different. Oh, that. What was that? What was that? I think it's hilarious. They're really good. Well done. How's it going? How's it going? Good? Yeah? What have we written down? Oh, what have we got? Oh, you don't have to. That's fine. Right? That's cool. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. But that's actually a good example of having both sides of the coin, isn't it? Because for you, it's a chosen change, but for other people, it's a forced change. That's actually a really good example. did you have a cultural change in there as well as a structure change? There you go. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Man, you had change going on all over the place. Jeez. But it's worked out well. So you wouldn't go back. You're an example of someone who would not go back. Oh, cool. Fantastic. Okay. All right. So again, this is the interactive part. So this is where once you get people talking. Okay. So there's been some sensational examples of forced change and chosen change. And I'm going to pick on you guys again, only because your example was so great. So do you want to just tell everyone what you were talking about?
So I think all of this, we're just talking about just changing business structure and how we have restructured and redeveloped the idea of how the business is going to look moving forward. So sometimes you've got to strip it back to move forward.
Absolutely. And we were talking about the fact that it's the perfect juxtaposition between the two. It's forced change and chosen change, because it's chosen change for the organisation because they know where they're going and what they're doing. But then it's forced change for the individuals because they're suddenly like, well, hang on, we didn't see this coming. Why is this happening? So, and your decision as far as, oh, excellent. Thank you so much. And would you go back? Would you change it back?
No. When you say change back, I think, as I said, it was for us personally, it's a strip back and restructure and move forward again. So no, I wouldn't go back to what we were doing previously. Doesn't mean that we don't have a vision for what we want to do in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're communicating that through
Correct
to everybody as you go, which
Correct.
makes it a lot easier for people to understand as they go.
Correct. Yep.
Awesome. Amazing. Okay. I'm going to come and talk to you guys now. Do you want to run through the what you had written down? Because you had some great ones as well.
We had COVID.
I think your turn, Liz.
Yeah, so we had COVID, not being able to exercise at certain times, only being able to go to the shops once a week, all those things that you just think are absolutely crazy now, but we were all forced to do. And the forced jab, if you wanted to work, you had to have this jab, that whether you agreed with it or not.
Yep.
We had lots of others like death, friendships, whoopsie baby, taste buds, jail.
Whoopsie baby is where I can't say to you, would you take that one back?
No. No, not that one. That one's fine. But yeah, so yeah, but COVID baby, everyone got stuff in COVID and baby was mine.
Yeah, absolutely. So COVID, nuts. How did we all get through that? We did. So there you go. Forced change, can get through it. It's all good. Who else wants to volunteer what they were talking about? Who else has got some? Yeah, great. Thanks, Anna.
So we just said, obviously I'm much older than the two girls that are with me here, but so looking back at the 5 to 10 years, I did paper files to electronic files, because we literally had a file for every single tenant, every single, the cupboards full of all the files. Hard phones to soft phones. So we've now gone to 3CX. So we all use mobiles. Printing the rent receipts and statements to now emailing them. Posting letters and changing to emailing them. So we used to post routine inspection reports, all that jazz.
Yep.
Crazy. We were formerly with Console. So Console going to Property Me, so to move forward in that regard. And I think what's super hard, the hardest part of our job, I think today, is just simply managing clients' expectations.
Yeah.
And making sure that we're continuing to use our brain rather than just going everything AI.
Yep. So would you change back?
No. definitely happy
I've
with
actually
the
considered that a second. No, definitely not.
happy with the tech that we've got
Yep.
today, but I think it's always remembering to still be that human first and agent second.
Mhm.
So although the tech is fantastic, I think it's still important to pick up the phone. But we still adopt some of the old school stuff because our directors are old school. So to keep old school tradition, I think, is very good, but not lose. Yeah, tech is great, but not to lose the human touch.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone else agree with that? Yeah? Okay. Who else would like to volunteer? I say volunteer because if we don't volunteer, I'm just going to wander down and just shove the microphone in front of somebody. Awesome.
So mine was ours was a forced slash. Well, it was a change that we wouldn't go back on. So we rebranded from a different brand, and then I think the only thing that still exists in the business is myself and my wife, and the location. All our staff are new. We've changed all our systems. We've changed all our brands. We've changed our phone system. We've changed everything. If you told me 2 years ago this is what you're going to do, I would have said not a chance in hell. I'm not interested because I know how much disruptions it's going to cost and cause to the business. Now I've going through it, and on the other side, so glad it's done. It's a different culture, it's a different environment, different really good people in the office. We had a cultural problem in the office before. Now we've got some really good people in the office, and we went from, so as a director, I was getting 2 to 3 complaint calls a day. And you can imagine what that did to my headspace, to the sales business, because I'm trying to head that up as well. So now I haven't had one in I don't know how long. Vegan's been with us, so like it's so good. So going from one side to the other is again 6 months ago. Oh, sorry, a year ago, 2 years ago. Would I was okay with what we had. I didn't know we could have better.
Yep.
Now I've kind of gone, why didn't I make this change earlier?
Yep.
So glad it's done.
Fantastic. Okay. One more? Anyone else? You know I'm going to do it.
We've sort of discussed more along the lines of if we didn't embrace change, what would have happened? We often refer to those that don't evolve or adapt are known as the dinosaurs. And we know where the dinosaurs are now. So we don't want to be the dinosaurs of the real estate industry. So, yeah, we sort of went more along the lines of what would have happened if we didn't, compared to the fact that we have.
Yeah.
So things along the lines of, yes, legislation has changes, which has then made us have to adapt our processes, things along those lines. But yeah, we've had a few staff changes, a couple of staff coming back because they realised that we're better.
Beautiful. Love that.
But yeah, so we actually, and I never regret a decision or a change. I just make a different one.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good way to look at it too, isn't it? That, it's sometimes it doesn't work exactly the way that you expected it was going to. And so, we make a change, another change. Okay, so just talking through the stages of change. So just to give you some clarity on the way that the whole change process actually works. Has anyone seen this process before? Yeah? So effectively, in the very beginning, it's pre-contemplation. So it's when you don't even really realise that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. So you might have a manager within your organisation who's just ticking along and they don't really acknowledge that there is a bit of a problem with the way that they are leading or the way that they communicate out with the team. Then the next step down is the actual contemplation. So this is where, again, using the example of the manager, they might start to see that their team is a little bit disengaged, that they're not communicating as well, morale seems to be low. So then they start asking themselves, okay, so is my leadership the problem? Is my management the problem? Is the way that I'm communicating with people the problem? So then we get into the preparation stage. So that's when maybe the manager starts to watch a few videos on YouTube, or starts to read a couple of books and things, and starts to accept or begin to understand that maybe they can change, and that actually will improve the environment. And then we've got the action. So again, the manager might be looking at it going, all right, I've realised that this is not ideal. The way that I'm leading the team is not ideal. So I am going to put these changes into place. So they might go to a few seminars and things and start to change the way that they communicate, start to change the language that they use, tone of voice, mannerisms, environment, all kinds of things that they will actually look at and acknowledge that if they make a shift, that may actually have a payoff. And then there's the maintenance. That's the continuing through, the ongoing, I am going to do this and I'm going to make this stick. So it's kind of like, your dieting type thing. You're going to start off the diet and you're all committed to it. And then you might start to just slide off a little bit. It's exactly that part of the process. And then the last part is ideally the termination. So that is the end of the process and you've actually seen it through. So you've got again, the example of the manager who actually sees the change that has happened and wants to continue that on. So they change their habits completely and it becomes, this is who I am now. This is what I do now. This is the way that I communicate now. So there is a formalized process to it. And there's a guy walking around on the roof because there's a leak in the corner there in case anyone was curious. So, it's not, it does sound like baby hippos, but I swear it's not. It's one guy who was in here before. So it really is about wanting the change and wanting to engage in it. And then the next change, we go all the way back to the beginning of this process again. So it can be just an ongoing loop, or it can be something that you grab hold of for a particular event or a particular situation, and then you don't need to use it again until such time as you need to bring the next change through. I think what we were talking about over here about changing entire structures, entire brands, phone systems, everything. This stages of change would have been just on a constant loop for you guys. It just would have been, okay, that's done, next one, this one, next one. And you probably engaged in it without even really realizing that you were doing it. Looking at it now, it's probably like, oh yeah, I did that, maybe jumped that one, but did that. So it is very much an ongoing loop and an ongoing process. So then we've got catalysts for change. So the catalysts for change are your good old problems, opportunities, and threats. So, oops, there we go. So the problem might be something you identify as become redundant, or it's actually broken. So can anyone give me an example of something that they would identify as they need to make a change because it's either redundant or broken or no longer fit for purpose? What would we look at? We had a whole lot of examples over with Peter and his team. Sorry?
Some platforms that you use?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So like REST, and I don't know if anyone remembers RP, good old RP. But we had to move off that because that was an example of forced change. Because RP decided that they weren't going to support that platform anymore. Because it got sold to, where did it get sold to? Console? Maybe? And they actually said, we're not going to support it anymore, so you need to go and find yourself a new system. So that was forced change for those of us who were around in the industry back when that happened. So that was absolutely your example of a problem, because that had to happen. So what about opportunities? What would be an example of an opportunity? Sorry? Yep. What else would we look at as being an opportunity?
Streamline the business where you reduce your costs but still be effective.
Yeah. Perfect example. Great. So reducing costs to be effective. Yep. Why not? Any other examples? So you could decide that you want to get fit. And the best time for you to do that is on a Saturday morning, because you are a property manager who does not work on Saturdays. And so you decide that you're going to start going to the gym on a Saturday morning. But what it means is that you have to sacrifice your Saturday morning sleep in to still fit all the things in your day on a Saturday that you would normally want to do. So it's an opportunity, but you've got to make the decision as to picking something up and then perhaps setting something down. And then there's the threats. So what would be an example of a threat? So a change that had to happen because of a threat. Sorry? Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Legislation.
What else? A complaint? Yeah, sure. Talk to me about that. Yep. So oh yeah, thank you. I forgot. They don't often give me a handheld mark, so I forgot that I had one. Anything else? Culture? Yep. How would you change that?
I suppose identifying what's going wrong and implementing ways to improve it, or terminating ways to improve it.
So a threat to the culture would be?
Staff member, owners. We do have some owners that are very reluctant to the changes that are potential financial risks for the company.
Yep.
Ones that aren't going to pass minimum standards, or some are still lagging their feet with safety checks or have done their own.
Yeah.
And aren't supplying certificates of compliance. So as a business, we've had to either continue to push or terminate.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. All right. So once we've gone through all of those, what are the roadblocks? What are perhaps some roadblocks that are going to stop us from being able to implement change? No, I've got mama. So,
Mindsets.
mindset? Absolutely. Yeah. What else? What else would stop you?
Being scared that that your clients, being scared that your clients, you're changing your name. I think that was a massive thing where our clients are going to leave us.
Yep.
I mean, it never happened. Like the name change happened, obviously, but the
Yeah.
clients leaving didn't happen. But that belief that your clients really care about what brand you are, because we were Ray White and it's such a big brand, and then realizing no, they really didn't care. They just cared about making sure that we've got the best service for them. And when we proved that was, we got better.
Yep.
We actually now started growing. Whereas probably since the beginning of COVID, we went backwards so much, and basically just, we're working on keeping what we've got and, controlling the loss. And now we've gone, no, we're now going to grow, and now look at it and go, could we have done that in COVID with a different brand, a different structure, different staff? And the answer is probably yes. So I cry about all the time we've lost. But yeah, as a business owner, yeah, I get what was said before about the finances. Like everything you do, you have to count how much it's going to cost. Whereas when I used to be a salesperson, I just go, change, yeah, I can do that. It cost me nothing, and you go hard. But yeah, the shoe's on the other foot now, and thankfully it worked out.
Yep.
So,
the fear was the initial step, though. That was the one thing that you had to overcome.
oh yeah.
So you had a great, gorgeous, beautiful plan,
Yeah.
but it was actually just taking the initiating step and pulling the plug and going, right, this is
Yeah,
where we're going.
I think that and being comfortable and getting uncomfortable. 18 years in one brand is a long time. When you change, it's like, why? I don't even know anybody from a different brand. Like there's so many people in another group that you just surround yourself with them. Not saying it's a bad thing, and a lot of them are in this room today. But yeah, it's just moving to a different brand is such a big thing because you have to meet new people, change your culture, change like Property Me was pushed on me a few times by my staff members. And then joined O'Brien is like, oh, so everyone except one office uses Property Me? Okay. I think that says a lot. So yeah, okay, I think it's time for a change. How are our customers going to handle it? What what's it going to do to our accounts department? What's it going to do to so many different things? Now we've done it. Like, oh, should have done it earlier.
Yep.
So it's just
I think
headspace.
that's one of the big things with change, isn't it? That once you get there and you get over it, you realize that you really had nothing to be scared about, and we probably should have done it a long time ago. So, you know, and the reason that you don't do it, of course, is because there's comfort in the status quo. There's comfort in just saying where you are and doing what you're doing day in, day out, and not changing anything. But, you know, to the point that was made earlier, you don't want to turn into a dinosaur either. So it really is that that decision about wanting to move forward, but it's perfectly realistic to have a fear element as part of that as well. And the other thing when the benefits are unclear, it's what I was talking about earlier with the pop that there and then I remember it. Fall off. Okay. What I was talking about earlier with the clients who decide to unplug because they can't see the benefit. They don't understand exactly what it is and the reason why you're changing the name of the business or you're changing the software or all of those things. So this is where the communication part really comes in about being able to explain to the clients the reason why these changes are being made. And when you're talking about the legislation, it is going to be a challenge for you to be able to articulate to the client what the benefits are. Because I'm quite sure that that's one of the major things that you're getting pushback on at the moment with the clients, is that you're telling them these things are happening and they're sitting there going, well, what's in it for me? Now I own the property and now it's costing me a whole lot more to hold on to that property. It's costing me a whole lot more to maintain the property. And I have got less rights now than I have ever had before. But you're asking me to pay more to have less. I can only increase my rent once every 12 months. All of these things that are now coming through. So this is something that we are going to talk about as far as scripting these things and being able to articulate them to the clients to be able to get the best outcome. Oops. And abandoning our efforts too quickly. Now, this is something else that we do see with the change process, that something goes wrong. To your point before, something goes wrong and everyone goes, oh, that's it, it's stuffed. Right, forget it, we're all walking away, we'll all just go back and we'll all use RP because Property Me, it's just not working. We just can't do what we used to do. So you get that far down the track, and this must have been a temptation in your world as well when you were making so many changes that something went wrong, because you cannot predict every single thing that is going to go on during a change process. There are always going to be things that come out of left field, and majoritively the things that come out of left field are going to be the things that they're going to be responses from people, because that's the one thing that you can't predict is how people are going to respond. So you can only give them as much information as you can give them. You can only provide them with the benefits and the understanding, etc., but you can never predict what they are going to respond with and how they're going to react. But then, of course, change leads to more change as well. So if you decided to, you know, I mean, you're a classic example of change leading to more change, I think, because, you know, we decided to change that and then that wasn't any good. So we changed that and then that wasn't any good. So when you're changing your software and you might go over onto Property Me and you were on Inspection Manager, but Inspection Manager doesn't integrate with Property Me as well as Inspection Express does. So you decide then that you're going to move over to Inspection Express. So there's a whole lot of knock-on effects when you're going through a change process. And again, if you put it back in the, is it a bit hot in here? Okay. If we go, oh, thank you. If we look at the dieting process again, okay? If you are the sort of person who gets a coffee every morning, and when you get your coffee, you get a cookie. If you want to go through the dieting process and you actually want to lose a bit of weight, you have to then make the decision that, okay, I'm not going to get the cookie when I buy the coffee. So you have to break that somehow. So maybe it is that you don't have a morning coffee, you have one in the afternoon. Maybe it means that you go to a different coffee shop, which I know in Melbourne, it's just like sacrilege to give up your barista. Maybe you don't go to that same coffee shop because you go to a different one that doesn't have the cookie sitting down the front. So it's the knock-on effect of this is the change that I want to make, but in order to achieve that, there's other things that I've got to put in place in order to bring all that through. Make sense? Okay, so the pros and cons of change. Now, back in your groups again, I'd just like you to have a bit of a chat around the positives and the negatives of bringing in a particular change. So it doesn't have to be any, like you can pick the change or you can just talk about it generally. But what are the pros? What are the cons? Got it? Your guy was on the roof before? It was like a little baby hippopotamus, like bang, bang, bang.
Like, it won't even hear me. I was like, I said, we've got a lot of things down here. So, hope to call me yesterday. Like, oh, but it's on my thing. But I'm the client.
Yeah. Exactly.
I would have said,
Yeah. Hearing over all this. Because there are people sitting there going, what the hell? So I'm like, okay, there's a dude up there.
yeah, hopefully not my
Yeah, cool. Yell out. Michael, you can say, perfect, thank you. They're going, pros versus, oh, we've got a lid. No, it's good. Yeah, yep, 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 yep. No, and people don't, you don't walk around with these anymore. So, you know, you're either desperately typing on your phone or you're walking around the place and you're dictating into it. Yep. Yep. Yeah. I know. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the great example of the pros and cons, isn't it? Because the pros is it's a lot quicker, it's more efficient, it's more effective. You've got so much more visibility of things. So from that side of it's great. But from the side of when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then you're like, well, what the bloody hell do I do now? So, yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So you save all this time with the tech, but then you're standing there, you know, scuffing around for 10 minutes going, anytime you're ready, you know, well. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Oh, exactly. I know. It's crazy. But I mean, no, I'm old enough to remember when we used to write them and we had them on the carbon forms and we used to, which you're too young for, but we used to actually like carry around the clipboard and yeah, they're the ones I mean. Oh, hilarious. So fun. Hey. So much discussion about pros and cons. I love it. Okay. We can start wrapping the conversations up. And then we can get a few people to start talking about their pros and cons list. I can put on my really good school teacher voice for you if you like and pull you up. All right. Okay, I love that there is so much conversation and it is brilliant and I hate to pull it up, but we've got an hour left and we need to get into legislation stuff. So I'm going to pros and cons. Or you're having a completely different conversation?
No, it's all work related. No, we were talking about actually some of the processes with VAs where with the drop down list, they could actually just put the supplier in, but they send us an email to please complete that. And by the time we send it back, and the same with insurances, the owner sends me the PDF insurance, but then I've got to send it to the VA to then put in reminders. And then she'll come back another email saying, this has been done. And it's sort of like, yeah, the pros and cons have changed.
Brilliant process called swing lanes.
Yeah.
Literally, it's just mapping things out and watching how many times a particular process does this.
Yes.
Because then you suddenly realise that what you want to be doing is that.
Yeah.
Great with post-its.
Yeah.
If you're a visual person, write all the steps down on post-its.
Yeah.
And then look at the different colours going across. And then you just go, right, okay, why is that person? Why is this entire process going from here to there, to there, to there, to there, when it could just go all the way up? And then one person at the end is the one who reviews it at that point, not intermittent points all the way through.
Yes.
Such a cool process. Love it. So thank you for that. Okay. I feel like you guys have been very quiet over there. Would you like to contribute something? So you thought if you stood over there, sat over there, you won't get to us. Oh.
We were just chatting about pros and cons, and we were chatting about obviously the pro is the end result, but the con is obviously how you get there, and obviously appeasing everyone and making sure that if we are changing a process or something within the business, that everyone is happy with that change. So we were just saying that the con was in the middle, but the pro is obviously the end result. So that's sort of what our main conversation was about.
Yeah, cool, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to come over here now. Okay, how about here? How do we go? I love it when no one wants to take the mic. It's so fun. You're among friends. Thank you.
We were talking about the pros and cons. So obviously our office is having a little bit of a change at the moment. We've got our Renee going to our Berwick office, which means there's a lot of change happening at Narre Warren. It's a bit of growth. So a pro for me is that I'm, stepping up, coming a bit of into a leadership role. And then, so that's a pro, but then a con is obviously I'm losing one of my colleagues. So yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Now, thank you for contributing that, because what we've got is some of the pros and cons that actually go through it. And the first one in pros is personal growth. So lovely segue, was so not coordinated. So the pros obviously are personal growth, improvement to your health and your life, learning new skills, meeting new people, technological development. So there's so many opportunities there when you're talking about what happens with the process of change. But then we're also talking about the cons, and that's when perhaps you realise the grass wasn't greener. Again, back to your point as well. People leaving and then coming back, because they go and they realise that what they thought was an ideal environment externally really wasn't everything that was cracked up to be. So, and that we actually see quite a lot. And the change wasn't true to you. So what you were sold as being the change, what you were sold as being the benefits of the change, etc., actually didn't end up resonating for you. Might have resonated for a whole lot of other people, but not for you. And then finally, it was too much too fast. There's too much change going on, and there's just, people don't feel comfortable because they just feel like every day they walk into the office and something else is happening. And they never get an opportunity to get their feet under them before something else happens, something else happens, something else happens. Now, depending on the organisation and the way that it was communicated and articulated, some people can find that fantastically fun. And they will thrive in that environment because it's just every day, it's like, oh, there's something new to learn, something else is going on. But there's plenty of people who don't thrive in that environment. So when you're going through the change process, it is about making sure that you're measured and you understand the people that you are communicating to. So when we get into scripting a little bit later with the legislation, we're communicating differently to different groups of people. You are not going to send the same communication that you would send to a residential rental provider out to a renter. You're obviously going to send them quite differently worded correspondence to advise them the difference and the benefits that are for each person. And that actually does beautifully bring us through into the legislation. Now, legislation, obviously, this is the catalyst for forced change. This is something that we have no ability to change it now. I was actually on the board of the REIV when these changes were initially being discussed. Please don't blame me. And we pushed back so hard because we kept trying to explain to them that it was too much. And what was going to happen was we were going to see a whole lot of clients actually choosing to sell their properties. So they were going to create an environment that was exactly what they were trying to avoid. And that is exactly the way that it's played out. But they didn't listen to us. The government knew better. And look where we all are now. So it's an interesting subtext, I guess, for when we're talking about catalysts for change and influences of change. If you choose to ignore certain levels of information that you are being given, rather than take them, consider them, then you don't have to adopt every single bit of information that comes your way. But it is always very wise to make sure that you do at least consider it. And then at the end of the process, if someone says, oh, this has all happened, it's like, well, you know what? We did know that that was a possibility. But we decided that the pros of proceeding with this particular change versus the cons of not proceeding with it was actually better for us. So if you can articulate that to people further down the track, then they are going to feel more comfortable about the change because they're going to feel like it was more considered. Yeah? Okay. So we are burning bridges all over the place with legislation right at the moment. So what I will ask you to do, and again, not planned, but thank you very much, Task Force, for giving us these little, our little notebooks there. What I get you to do, we're going to get you to divide it up into 3 columns, but what I might get you to do is do a different page for each of these, because we're going to start to look at broken the changes down into 3 areas. So it's when we're starting a tenancy, those that are occurring during the tenancy, and those that are occurring when we're ending the tenancy. For those of you who are on Zoom, don't even try and read my handwriting. So we're going to go through these section by section and look at what the actual new legislation, the things that have come through fairly recently, where they sit. We're then going to be looking at particular workflows that you can organise within your own organisations. So things that you can look at and say, all right, well, now we need to add this particular step into this process or this particular step into this process. And then we're going to give you some action items to take back as well. So we're going to talk about what can we do to make these things happen and to make them easier for us. So when we're having those conversations though, we want to go blue sky. Like money's no object. Don't sit there and think, oh, I couldn't possibly say that, I couldn't possibly do that. Say it. Because what you might find is that that actually starts a bit of a spark in someone's head as to how they can create that. Or you might even say it out loud and your boss will go, well, we can do that. Why would you think we couldn't do it? So this is our opportunity just to completely throw it out there. Okay. So the start of the tenancies. What we know is we've got limits on rent in advance. I was going to write them up there, but I'm not going to be able to, and you're not going to see it. So what do we know? What do we know about limits on rents in advance? Yeah, you get to microphone if you don't mind, because then the people will, yeah.
So we're talking about the
Mm-hmm.
that we're not allowed certainly the advance.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody offers higher than the rent that's advertised.
Yep, absolutely. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Okay, so let's think about how can we prevent this from happening? So we can't accept an unsolicited offer of rent over the asking price, and we also can't ask more than 1 month's rent in advance. Clearly, that's in legislation. That's what we're limited to now. Why did they make that change? Thank you.
So some applicants couldn't have an unfair advantage that they could offer 6 months up front, be in that position or offer more rent.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Why did anyone think paying rent up front was something that we ever wanted them to do? Can I ask? It just makes our life harder. So actually this one I really like. I think that's actually kind of a good one. Pardon? Yeah, coming in November.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. It's coming in November. Mm-hmm.
Because that was something that they used to demonstrate their ability to travel rent without having employment in place or a long-term employment in place.
Yep.
Correct. So it's, I think that the people that are going to get affected by that particular area is people that are coming in without that.
Yeah. So the comment was that it is going to affect people who are coming from overseas because they're using that because they obviously don't have rent records or things like that within the Victorian or Australian landscape. So it's harder. They perceive it as harder. So they think that if they offer more rent or an extended amount of rent up front, that will, I guess, balance the playing field, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So how do we stop it?
You can't accept an unsolicited. We can't ask for it.
You can't ask for it.
But if they offer it.
Yeah, sorry, just so people at home can hear you.
You'll be able to hear me. I'm just saying we must not accept an unsolicited. So what if we go and solicit it?
You can't.
So that's a salesman out of me.
Say it's a salesman thing to say. Oh, really amazing. Thanks, Peter. So no, we can't take solicited or unsolicited. No. The other thing that you maybe want to watch for is people who say, well, I'll pay X amount of rent up front, but I'll pay the first month's rent and then I'll pay you another 6 months after that, thinking that they're kind of getting through the cracks a little bit that way. Because if they don't pay it in the initial payment, then it's not going to look like we ever asked them to do it. Peter? Thank you.
What does that mean for renters for like 6 months into their lease have now got to like an advance at work and want to pay a year? Are they allowed to do that or is it still a no?
Yeah, they're allowed to do it. They're not stopping people from paying in advance, but we're not allowed to ask for it.
So they're not asking for it.
Rents in advance?
Yeah.
We have to say
Meaning at the start of the tenancy is
Yeah.
obviously different to during the tenancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So during the tenancy is where you're going to have the wiggle room for
Yeah.
people to be able to decide that, exactly to your point back, they've got a bonus or something along those lines, so they've actually decided that this is what they want to do. So, okay.
Months in advance. They can pay their month and then they could turn around and now want to pay 6 months.
They can.
They can.
They can do it, but there just can't have any evidence anywhere that anyone had, the conversation's been had.
Yeah.
So
We've
did
always
say they have
been really like strict on, obviously we'll never ever speak about if people go, what can we do to make ourselves stand out? I'm like, just apply straight away so that we can do all your references, et cetera, et cetera. But if people have offered on their application, we'll put it to the owner. But how does that then, it's never ever solicited even in the last 2 years.
Yep.
So how would that then change? Because we're never asking it.
You
Yeah.
pass the offer forward.
So it's just, yeah,
There
okay,
you
so
go.
we're going straight to the,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We just can't put the offer forward. And we have to pull it up at that point and say, you know what, under legislation, I'm sorry, but we can only submit at the rent level that the owner is requesting. You'll notice in legislation doesn't say anything about people making low offers. So, that'll still happen. So what I would like you to do in your groups now is let's focus on the workflow. So what do you need to bring into your existing processes to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen? Yeah? Thank you. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you, appreciate it. Gets you up around. Sorry. fine for them to do it if they are doing it voluntarily. As long as there's no evidence anywhere that we have said to them, pay 3 months or anything like that. So if they've been paying 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, yeah, of course you will. Yeah. Well, there's always been that school of thought that even if a tenant pays, sorry, I'm old school, I lapse into tenant every now and again. Yeah. But that's exactly the point. So there's always been a school of thought that either you hold back a certain amount or that you only pay to the owner at the end of the month that has been completed. A lot of trust account managers didn't want to do it that way because if there was a lease break and the tenant had paid 6 months in advance and after 3 months, then you'd end up having a massive argument with the owner. It's about, you've got to give us 3 months back. So I know that that's a thought process with a lot of trust accounts. They just go, oh, no, this is the way we want to do it. Yeah. Yeah. It's always been such a drama when people want to pay massively in front. And it's like, well, what do we do with it now? How much do we hold? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. See, this is the bizarre thing. There are some things in there that I know why they put them in, but as a property manager, you're just like, oh, thank you. Because I always hated that. I always hated when people would pay in advance. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're right. Whoop. Sorry. Down on your phone. Okay. Okay. I think you'll find that I think you'll find that the systems now won't actually allow. You used to have that ability. You could offer more. In Victoria, especially, I think they're going to have to stop that. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So it hasn't come out yet, but it will. And there'll be the legislation changes to. There's no point in telling the owner because they can't accept it. So I think that this is exactly where the workflow is. Like in your organisation, what are you going to do to make sure that they don't inadvertently? Yep. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Okay. We have got a little bit to get through. So if we can pull this up and we have got a question back. So
if a renter has a request for, say, an aircon and they offer to pay a little bit more rent in order to get that installed, are we allowed to bring that up to the rental provider? No?
I would say no under the way that the legislation is now written, because, excuse me, as we all know, we can't contract out of the Act. The Act is very clear that it says that rents can only be increased every 12 months. Excuse me. So I don't think that we have the ability to do that as we have in the past, because it's certainly something you could do, but my problem would be if something happens further down the track and you end up at VCAT and the tenant says, oh, well, yeah, I had a rent change here, but that was only 7 months after the last rent change. So, sorry? A new application? Mm-hmm. Again, not under the way the legislation's written. It actually says, oh, Peter, thank you. Oh, you my little helper today.
Just invoice and get compensation to do it. Because technically it's not a higher rent.
Have a compensation amount for a higher aircon unit, so you could get around it that way.
I think you get around it that way. Yep, absolutely. But you wouldn't be able to apply it to a rent payment. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, for those at home, the comment was that what you could do is actually make it as a compensation invoice. So you could get the tenant to pay their portion as a, well, compensation, but I'm sure we could come up with, different wording for it. Yeah, because then it's not being applied to the rent. Yeah. So it's not a rent increase, it's not being applied as a rent amount, it's actually a payment to the owner for the improvement of a particular service or supplying an additional service. So I think, brilliant idea. I think we could probably work around it that way. Okay. So this is the next part of the question too. What is it that we can do to make these things happen outside of our workflows? But the next thing, obviously, with starting a tenancy is about advertising the properties as well. So what do we know about advertising the properties? Right, Peter, yeah. I just need to get the microphone because that way the people at home can hear.
So you can only advertise a fixed amount.
Yep. And what else do we know about advertising properties? We've got two.
Currently, you can advertise a property for lease without it meeting minimum standards, as long as it meets minimum standards at a commencement. But from November, you can't even advertise a property without it meeting minimum standards.
Yep. So every property before we advertise them has to meet minimum standards. So again, going back to the workflows, what are you going to have to implement in your office? What are you going to have to put into your workflows to make sure that those things, that it is actually up to minimum standards? Now, the interesting thing about the wording is it says that the owner or the agent reasonably believes that the property met minimum standards when they started advertising it. Now, reasonably believes. What would you say would give you the ability to reasonably believe that a property met minimum standards?
Checks done and no reports from the tenant about any of those items being an issue.
Checks done and no reports from the tenants about any items. Okay. What else? What would give you the ability to reasonably believe that a property met minimum standards?
There's a checklist on consumer affairs and you'd go through and check off and make sure it met all those.
Yep. So someone physically goes into the property and checks everything off on the checklist, signs off on the checklist and dates it, that they have gone through and they have made sure that everything is there. Yep. Okay. What else would you say would give you the ability to reasonably believe that that a property met minimum standards?
Well, I'd be making sure that my photos that I'm advertising with are after any of the minimum standards to make sure the blinds are in bedrooms and stuff like that, not to spark any interest.
Yep.
And that would give, obviously, you can see there clearly in the photos.
Yep. Okay. So we're using the photos. So Purple Pingers doesn't go and list us and have a photo up close of the old switchboard. So we love Jordan. Anything else? What else would give you the ability to reasonably believe? I feel like an evangelist. I reasonably believe.
In the disclosure statement before we put the property online. So then it's all have the minimum standards and everything there.
Yep.
So
yeah. So reasonably believe, I think, has been written there because as an agent, the owner has said to you, yes, the property meets minimum standards. I know there's a couple of things that need to get done, but I'm going to get my tradesperson to go down there and complete these things the day before you start advertising the property. So trusting souls that we are as property managers, we will say, no problem at all. We won't go down and check it. We will believe you because you have told us this is happening. So do you think that would get you out of jail at VCAT? Okay. Completely agree. Yes. Okay. So let's give some thought now to what can we do? How can we put these things into the workflows? And also, blue sky, what could we do that would demonstrate that the property met minimum standards? And what could we do internally to make sure that there was no acceptance of unsolicited or solicited rent increases or anything along those lines? So I'll give you 5 minutes to do that. Sorry, yes, question again?
Compliance checks.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. You've got them written down. So you've got a professional company to go out and do the compliance checks. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, let's take a couple of minutes to write those down. Legislation in commercial property, right? So commercial, retail, large scale buildings, things like that, they actually have to have someone go out and confirm because they have fire rated doors and all that kind of stuff, right? So they have the essential services checks that get done. I don't know. Yep. Yeah. Well, I guess as far as that's concerned, there are things that you could add to your routine inspection list and also your finals as well. So there is an element of going out and, okay, yeah, we've checked these things off. Yep. Yep. I think that there's going to be a lot of agents who are going to do exactly that because it's the time in cost of having your team out there doing those things. Yep. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It would have made more sense. I agree. Yeah. Okay. Still got a few more to get through. So I'll get you to start wrapping it up. Okay. There's two questions. One is, what are we adding into our workflows? And the other is blue sky. What can we do to ensure that we comply with these things? That is not necessarily in the legislation. So who would like to volunteer? For Peter with his microphones. He's ready. Good. Okay, great. Thank you.
For the advertising and rent in advance, look at our inspect real estate settings, see if they can offer something so that the tenant can't change the rent amount.
Yep, perfect.
For the advertising and minimum standards, check our photos, get a minimum standards check done, and put that into our process street for vacating and new tenancy checklist to make sure that it's done.
Awesome. Okay. So that's your workflow side. Okay. Did you come up with any blue sky ideas as to what else you could do to be able to demonstrate that those things are done? Anything? No? That's all right. That's fine.
This wording has actually really upset me. I thought it was going to be a lot more simple for us property managers. Reasonably believes any owner can sign off that they reasonably believe that their property meets minimum standards. So does the onus then come on us that their expectation is that us as property managers go out and do these checks for them, and we reasonably believe that properties are structurally sound or that there's ventilation? It's actually really upset me because we had a full process in place that we were going to offer them 2 trades to use, that they would have had to pick one of those or go to the property themselves and fill out the minimum standards checklist and then offer it to us. So we could potentially lose a lot of business to a lot of cowboy companies that are doing the checks themselves because they reasonably believe that it passes.
Yep. This is exactly what Anna was actually just talking about as well, around from the commercial perspective in commercial retail properties and your multi-story high-rise properties. They actually have to get professional checks done for their essential services. Right. So if it's legislation under that, why did the government not go a step further and say you actually have to get this done professionally, rather than put it back onto the property managers who we're time poor enough without having to go and do things like this, for sure.
And then what happens if we reasonably believe it passes and then the Consumer Affairs Task Force come in, go through one of our advertised properties and we've missed one thing because we're not tradespeople, we get 11 grand fine?
I think, well, you don't, the owner does. The fine does not come to you. So there is nothing in the Act that talks about the fine going to the organisation. The fine goes to the owner. Then that's when the owner might come back to you and want to have an argument with you about it.
Signed off on it.
But be clear on that. There's no, under this particular section, the 60 penalty units, not the company. So.
Yeah. I don't think that.
No, it's so people can hear you
Is there
at home.
a grace period to get the rectifications done?
If the task force comes through, you mean, or?
So the owner gets audited, yeah, because it's doesn't meet minimum standards. Is there not a grace period for the rectifications to get done, and then they go out and recheck again?
I think with the task force at the moment, the methodology for them is that the property, if it's being advertised, under the legislation, it does say that it has to meet minimum standards. To the point earlier, up until when this actually crunches, we always could advertise the property, but go through the process of getting all the rectification done prior to a tenant actually moving in. Now they're bringing it all the way back that the property actually has to meet standards prior to advertising. Because that's in the legislation, what I would anticipate is going to happen is if you advertise that property, the task force comes through and sees that it does not meet minimum standards, I don't think they're going to want to give anybody any grace periods. They want to make examples of a few people once all this comes in because they want to scare people into doing it right.
Yeah.
And for those of us who would have done it right anyway and don't need scaring, it's just another thing.
Sorry, I'm relatively new at
It's all right.
helping out in the property manager
We all have
department.
to start somewhere. It's fine.
Question is, we do a minimum standards check. How long does that last? Do you have to get it done every 12 months, every time a new,
Change over tenancy.
there you go. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So your minimum standards checks will go every 2 years.
Yeah.
So your gas and electrical and smoke alarms are annually.
Safety checks.
But the minimum standards checks that we do, as far as I would recommend that you do them every time you do a routine inspection, just to make sure that there isn't something that has, broken or whatever, your mold starting to appear, and you can pass it on to the owner. But that's a best practice recommendation as far as doing it every time you go into the property.
Cool.
So, okay. I think that it makes, okay, the question was around minimum checks actually paying companies to go out and do them rather than the property managers do them. I would be all for that. I think it's probably going to be one of those things that that's going to get done at the beginning of the tenancy prior to the property actually going on, being advertised, if that's what you're proposing. And then every 6 months after that, when you're in the property at the routine inspections or whatever, you could check those over as part of your workflow if that was what you decided to do. But I'm all for external companies going out and doing this. Because I think it's a couple of benefits to it. One is it takes the heat off the property managers. It gives you a little bit more time back in your day. And personally, I know a lot of property managers who take all this on to the extent that they literally make themselves sick over it. Because they're like, oh my God, did I miss that? What if I missed that? What if I didn't do it properly? What if? So I think an external company would be probably a very good idea. And I think it'll be one of those things that will come through over time, that it will be normalised. And to your point as well, expecting the property managers to do it all the time. And I think it's probably a good idea to push it out to clients, because if the clients aren't going to pay for it, then if they get stung further down the track because it's not right, then they will regret the fact that they didn't actually pay for it.
I was literally just about to say exactly what you said, Sophie. I've got a compliance check that actually do minimum standards, and especially for new investors, every time it's a new listing, they haven't been on the market before, I get them to do a proper one through a compliance check. Then I can carry on from there, and maybe every few years get it updated. But we were just talking about, like, an idea is with the routine inspections, and we actually said this the other day, is we're going to change our template in Inspection Express and to include the minimum standards to sign off on it every time we're in a routine inspection.
Great idea. Great idea.
It'll take us that little bit longer, but I think it'll save us down the track.
Okay, so that's in addition to the workflow things we were talking about. So workflow adjustments is actually that. So it's recording inspections prior to the advertising commencing. Recording inspections could be on Inspection Express, Inspection Manager. It could be just a paper checklist that actually gets signed and dated and goes into the file if you still run paper files. So there's certainly opportunities in a lot of different ways for that to actually get done. And for the rent in advance, the training and the process, because we do get, every now and again we get rogue salespeople who decide that an over-the-top offer on rent. I was just gesturing in that general area. I wasn't picking on you. Because that's the way they're trained. They're trained to want to find the best deal, aren't they? So, they might be helping you out on the open for inspection. Someone comes up and says, can I offer another $20 a week? Yeah, make it 50, then you'll get it. So.
I've just changed the advertising.
What advertising? And also the timing of your statement of information and your mandatory disclosure. So putting those into your workflows and making sure that all of that information is there and it's provided at the right times. So your statement of information is part of your application. So that should be fine. There shouldn't be very much that you have to do as far as that's concerned. That should all be there regardless of which application company or process you're actually using. And then the mandatory disclosure, again, to the point at the front here, that's when you send it off to the owner, and they're the ones who start ticking away and saying, no, there hasn't been a homicide in my property in the last 5 years, and so on and so forth. The majority of owners that I know that pay very, very, very little attention to their properties wouldn't actually know if there had been a homicide in their property in the last 5 years. And they perpetually send them back to us anyway and say, I don't know the dates that the checks were done. Can you please complete this? In the event that you add information onto a mandatory disclosure, send it back to the owner and get them to sign off on it. Or send them a copy of it and say, I have just added this in for you. Please let me know if it's incorrect or if any of the other information is no longer correct. So cover yourself as far as that's concerned. And then blue sky stuff. So these were just some ideas that I had. So you could have, like we do with the privacy notice, you could have a laminated notice that you put onto the kitchen bench that says, we will not accept any offers over and above the rent, over and above the advertised rent. So you could do something like that. And can you have a minimum standard certificate that you maybe leave on the kitchen bench, or do you make it as part of your advertising? Property complies with minimum standards. Exactly right. Yeah. But then you're just putting it in there. So just an idea. And if you use an external organisation, maybe you put that in there. Property complies with minimum standards as confirmed by the Check Hero that does it. I think they're one of the ones that does it. Sorry, task force. And then we want checklists for everything. And I know that checklists are frustrating, and I know it's yet another bit of information that we've all got to complete. But if we are out there and we're doing these checks and we're making sure that we've got the checklist and they're signed off, then it's one less thing for you all to lose sleep about. Yes, Peter. Which microphone would you like to use?
Salesperson speaking.
Yep.
Can you advertise the property for more money and write in there that you will consider less?
I was thinking exactly the same. What? Hang on, I was big often offer best rent, don't they?
They do
Often offer less rent.
do offer less rent in certain markets, most definitely. I don't think we've seen it in our market for quite some time. Raise your hand if I'm wrong. I haven't seen people making, oh, there you go. There was someone at the back who's, okay. What it says is the rent has to be, you have to advertise it for a fixed amount. So I would think you'd be skating very, very close to the edge, putting something in there saying, we will consider a lower offer. Because then, is that actually a fixed amount? Because you've already told them that you're prepared to negotiate on it. So that would be my feedback on it. If you want to go rogue, you go rogue. Let us know how it goes. Okay. So just moving on, because we're having so much fun, we're running out of time. All right. So during the tenancy, what do we know about rent increases?
Does that include re-advertising the properties? Somebody thought that included re-advertising.
No, not in Victoria.
Okay.
In New South Wales, yes.
Okay.
In Victoria, no. So at the end of a tenancy, you can increase the rent because that original tenancy has finished.
Yeah.
You can't do it if you have a changeover of tenants. I would tell you that I wouldn't do it in that scenario. Or so if you have a tenant transfer, I would say I wouldn't be doing it. I'd be waiting the 12 months.
Lease records. Lease back.
No, lease break. I would say you could do it with a lease break because it's a termination of the tenancy. So I would say you could.
Their tenancy, if you were doing that?
Yeah, but you're not increasing it for that tenancy though. Yep.
Do 6 months remaining from that one.
Mm-hmm.
6 months eats into that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a 12-month contract.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you increase the rent at 6 months if they had a 12-month contract?
Because they're terminating the contract. They've told you they're terminating the contract. So the contract no longer stands. So it is no different whether it's a 6-month tenancy and they've moved out, they've given notice and they've moved out at the end of the 6-month tenancy, or whether it's a 12-month tenancy and they're terminating at the 6-month point. That would be my answer. What you do in your organisation, entirely up to you. If you say to clients, we can't do it because you're worried about whether, you know, how far the needle's going to go, and you want to wait to see whether anyone does actually get caught out, yes, at VCAT over it. But to my mind, it's the end of one tenancy, you're starting up another, it's completely separate lease agreement, it's separate commencement date, it's separate everything. So I would think you could do it. You do have to mitigate the loss. Actually on that though, I would say that as long as all of your lease break fees were done at the same rent, the previous rent, not the elevated one, which you wouldn't anyway, but I'm just thinking out loud. I would think that you would probably be okay, would be my thought. So, yeah. And I don't want to be the person that ends up in front of VCAT over it. So let's see how we go with that one. Okay. What else do we know about rent increases? We know we can only do them over every 12 months. What else do we know? 90 days notice? Okay. What else do we know? Pardon? Yep. So we have to provide the methodology of the way that we're calculating the rents. So we need specific wording and we need to provide the calculation process. Because the renter needs to be able to look at that and say, they have come up with that amount of rent because that multiplied by that equals that. Or here are all the examples of the properties that we have used in the CMA.
Can we just use the CMA?
You can just use the CMA. If you don't want to use CPI or the MMI, you can use.
So when we're writing a rent increase, we can keep writing them the same as we're currently writing them? Nothing like that
I don't know the way that you're currently writing them, but what you can do is say, based on the market, on comparable properties in the area, which are as per attached on the CMA.
Oh, we can keep doing that.
Yeah. So you absolutely, you can still, you want to continue using the CMAs, most definitely. Can I make one comment about CMAs though? You cannot, and this is in the legislation, you cannot utilise other properties in the same block as being the examples of why you are saying that the rent needs to increase to that. It's in the legislation.
So
don't shoot the messenger. It's in the legislation.
All right.
Yep.
Question.
Hold on.
Question.
Okay.
Wait.
We're running out of time. If you want to get out of here by 11:45 and have your morning tea, or we can get the morning tea, bring it back in here and we can keep going because I've got all day. This is brilliant. I love legislation. I could do it all day.
What is a block?
Sorry?
What is a block?
What is a block? Okay, this is probably a very good question because that is not defined. But what it does say, hold on. Here's one I prepared earlier. I think it's in here. It might actually just be on the Consumer Affairs website if anyone's got access to it, wants to bring it up. No, it's not in there. Well, think about it for a sec. You've got a property of 12 apartments, all owned by the same owner. So the owner can then control how much they're increasing the rent by. What
if they're next door to each other?
You're also probably what they're trying to capture is your high-rise buildings in the city where they could just use all of their comparables in the block and effectively create their own CMA environment and their own rent environment because they're not looking at anything externally. They're just looking at what they've got.
What about if the owner owns like 3 houses in a row? Does that count? And like they're all rented out at different prices and now they're all on the market. Could we use that as a CMA? Or does that come into the high rises?
I don't want anyone to get caught. That's all. So it's on the Consumer Affairs website. So
okay.
I
also have a follow-up question.
Yeah. It's on the Consumer Affairs website right now. So I actually think it's been there for a while, but no one's been caught out on it yet. Okay. So rent increases, 90 days notice, specific wording and calculation.
In regards to the 90-day notice,
Yep.
it comes in on the 25th. Is that correct?
Pardon?
Is it the 25th of November that it starts? So if we send a rent increase on the 24th, can you send a 60-day notice?
Well, the way that VCAT has always done it is they always grandfather. So as of anything that happened prior to the date of implementation, they go, okay, that's a completely different environment to what's happening as of today.
Okay.
So you've generally been perfectly fine.
Okay.
The only thing I can say to you, which is just an example, like in New South Wales on the 19th of May, they got rid of the no reason notices. And there was a whole lot of clients that went, I want to get rid of my tenant. We need to serve notice on them now. So NCAT is actually pushing back on those because they're seeing it as an opportunistic notice to vacate. So if the tenant pushes back on it and it ends up at NCAT, the owners are having a whole lot of trouble actually getting those through. So, but that's, I mean, it's not, that's NCAT. And also because they were really trying very hard to get rid of exactly that. The owners just being able to terminate tenancies just because they felt like it. Because of course a tenant can do that, but we won't go into that. They don't know.
Oh, they really didn't get that.
Yep. So there you go. Okay, we've got to hustle, people. Okay. Next on, during a tenancy, what do we know about rent payments? Anna knows all about rent payments. We were talking about it before. What do we know about rent payments? No one wants to throw this one up? Can't charge any fees at all?
You can charge if the tenant gets hit with a bank fee, if they choose to pay by credit card, and for example, there's fees there from the bank, they're allowed, but there can't be any other third party, i.e. rental rewards, fees and the like.
Yes. Okay. So again, that's the way the legislation is written. It actually is trying to capture and trying to stamp out third party organisations like rental rewards, and I'm not picking on them, it's just an example, who have been charging fees to tenants to pay their rent. So they've been charging them $10 a month convenience fee. They've been charging them $1 a month for something else. They've been charging them $25 for something else. And there are a lot of organisations that, oh, have fun. Can you ask them, they're trying to stamp that out. So they're trying to stamp out organisations like To Apply and Ignite, etc., that you could make an application, but then if you decided to hold your information that you wanted to keep using the same application form, some of them were charging a fee. That's what they're trying to stop. So the legislation actually says it excludes residential rental providers, agents, and banking institutions. So they can pass fees on.
So Sophie, if there's insufficient funds, but they get hit from their bank, that's okay.
That's okay.
That's right. Third platform.
I don't think you can charge that. They won't be able to. Yeah. But if they wanted to pay by credit card, that's okay because they've chosen that.
They're done.
Unless they find another way to do it. But the way the legislation is written at the moment, yes, that's my interpretation of it. They may have a different one. They might try and.
It'll be the agency paying them moving.
Yeah, well, that's a possibility too. I certainly know a lot of agencies that cover the cost of BPay just for convenience sake, because that's the way they want the tenants to pay their rent. So it's like, well, here you go. This is the way we want you to pay it. It doesn't cost you anything. That's the free option. Pay that way. Sorry, the
agency be required to pay the dishonor fee. That's what I don't understand.
No, well, okay. Again, the way that legislation is written is that, which we're actually going to get into, but we'll kind of race ahead, I think. It actually says that you have to provide the information to the renter of the options around how they pay their rent and any fees that may be incurred from that decision. So if you decide to go direct debit and your rent, there isn't enough rent there, and you cop a dishonor fee from the bank, and I would also argue if you cop a dishonor fee from the agency because of the way that it's written, that is actually okay because you have written that down and they have selected that option. And you've given them a fee-free option. They can go the fee-free option, go for their life. They can go direct debit, they can go BPay, they can go credit card. But what we're going to have to do is actually list those things out now.
But Sophie, we can, as an agency, charge a dishonor fee.
That's, if you read the legislation, that's actually, that one I do have. Okay. You know what, I had it on a slide and Fiona said it's too wordy and people won't want it. I'm like, okay. Okay, a person carrying on a business other than a person specified in subsection 2 must not demand or receive a fee for any prescribed matter in relation to an application to enter into residential rental agreement or the payment of rent. So we've got 80 penalty units and 400 penalty units, so fine for that. For the purposes of subsection 1, the following persons are specified. So these are the people who are excluded. A residential rental provider, a residential rental provider's agent, or an authorised deposit-taking institution or institutions within the meaning of the Banking Act 1959. So it's quite clear, if you're under subsection 1, you ain't charging for any of those things. But if you're in subsection 2,
That's similar with 99 cents.
pardon?
That's similar with their 99 cents per cent.
I don't think you can. Maybe that's an interesting one. Yeah, it might be. Okay, we've got to hustle. Okay, so rent payments. We know that we've got to do one free payment method and charging bank fees, dishonor fees is okay under what we have just read through. During a tenancy, keeping properties meeting minimum standards, including ongoing safety checks. What do we know about that? Something we've been doing for a while, so we're all pretty comfortable with it. How many people are getting pushback from clients at the moment about the cost of it? Yeah? Why do I have to do it again? Why does it cost me so much? Yeah.
Is the change coming in that now there's no properties that can't get away with it? Because previously anything that had a tenancy prior to a certain date didn't have to have it done.
So there were exclusions to minimum standards, most definitely. But that's actually been taken out now. So it does say in the legislation that every property is now captured under it. Yeah. Okay. So super quick. The other thing, blind cord requirements. How are we going with blind cord requirements? Does everyone understand what the requirement is there? No? Okay. So why don't they have blinds in here? That would have been so much more. Okay. So old Venetian blinds that have got the cord that hangs down, that cannot hang and pull on the ground anymore. You've got to put cleats on the wall. And it has to be, it cannot be less than 1.6 metres. So 1600 mils. From the floor. And it also cannot create a loop that's bigger than 22 centimetres, 220 millilitres. So you've got to make sure that the amount of cord that's there is not, because some of those organisations, the way that they, build. But anyway,
install.
That actually install, they have a whole lot of cord that just sort of hangs around down the bottom. So you have to get rid of that. The ones that have the automatic, actual like little beaded kind of things that are attached to the wall. This is the technical term, the beaded kind of thing. That's actually attached to the wall. They're perfectly fine.
Those are rollable.
So they're all right.
Just one.
Mhm.
Like 100 times, the old school ones.
Yep.
We've got to tell our owners that we need to have them restrung.
They don't have to be restrung. No. It's like if you've got the cleat on the wall that they can do that. Do you know what? Don't restring it. What you do is you pull it down and you tie a knot in it, cut it off, and away you go.
Correct. Yeah.
All we're talking about is that you're only talking about the extra stuff. Why do I find that so amusing? So yeah, there's that, and ironically, this has been in New South Wales since 2020. So we're only just bringing it in now.
Has anyone come up with a solution on that around line cords that happen to be in the middle of a window? Has anyone had that where you have like a big glass window and you have two sets of blinds on the glass windows and one of the blind cords is just
Flip the blind around.
You should flip the blind around it. Yeah.
Unless you've got three, in which case we're going to be in trouble.
Can you glue it to the window? Bit confused with that.
That's actually a really good question. I'm trying to, who would have an answer to that? Yeah, it's got it. It's 1.6. So have it all the way up.
Yeah.
Or Anna. Yes, it is to stop exactly that, to stop children having it wrapped around them. But then if you have a shorter statured person, like it is not a problem for myself, but a shorter statured person might find it difficult to actually reach up there to get it. And I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's like once the air conditioners come in, there are going to be properties that you cannot put an air conditioner into those properties. So that's going to be heaps of fun.
I was just going to say, I've got the two blinds over my glass back sliding doors and my cord's up high enough that I can only just reach.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. So it's there.
and it's, yeah, because it can't be flipped the other way.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
All right. We're having so much fun. We've gone over time. I'm so sorry. So what I would normally do at this point is tell you to do your workflows and to come up with blue sky ideas. I'll get you to do that when you're back in your offices with your own workflows and your own team, and you can talk them through. I'll just throw up there for you some of the things that I put in there. So scripted phrases for your increases to suit every method. And say to everybody, you don't deviate from this. This is what you use. Because then you won't get caught. Confirm that the renter was offered more than one option for the rent payment. Now, however you want to do that in your organisation, you can do it. But I think there needs to be some sort of confirmation somewhere in your processes that actually shows that you offered more than one, or if you only offer one, that it is a fee-free option. And the last one is your routine inspections, include the minimum standards checks. So with the key actions, you can have a handout for all renters advising the payment options and the costs that go with them. So dishonour fees, credit card fees, whatever it might be. Can your software add in the items for minimum standards? So that was brought up as well. And an escalation process for non-compliant properties. I do due diligence quite regularly for organisations that are selling or buying rent rolls. The number of rent rolls that I go into that they either have something in Property Me or a spreadsheet and there is nothing. And when I question them on it, their response is, oh, we've sent a few emails off to the owner, but they haven't responded. And so that one just hasn't been done. There needs to be an escalation process within your organisation that if a client is not responding and you have a property that is non-compliant, it needs to go above you for the owner of the business or the department manager or whatever it is to make a decision if they choose to retain the management of that property. Because the fines are massive, and you can imagine if something goes wrong and somebody dies because a property is non-compliant, that is huge. And they will always, always, always come after us because we're the ones who've got the PI. So just, sorry to put a somber thing over it, but just be aware that the risks are very high. And to me, they outweigh the decision for you to hold on to a property that's perhaps returning you $100, $120, $130 a month. If your client won't do it, I'd be telling them to go down the street to another organisation. Because I'm quite sure once they get there, they are going to say to them, is your property compliant? No, it's not. We need to be standing up and saying to clients, it is not good enough anymore and we're not risking ourselves because you want to save yourself a couple of $100. Okay, racing through. End of tenancy. Notices to vacate and extended notice periods. What do we know? 90 days? Yep. No more, no reason. Heartbreaking. Okay. Minimum 90 days notice to vacate. Absolutely. What do we know about disposing of tenancy information? What do we know?
Have to dispose of it, but there's a time period.
There's a time period, most definitely. What is the time period? 2? No. Close, but no.
3 years.
Do I have an advance on 3 years? 3 years, 6 months, good use.
With you at the back. 3 years. So you have 3 years to get rid of tenants' information once they have vacated the property. How many old tenants do you think you have got sitting in G Drive?
Don't even start.
Or in your archives? Got to get rid of them. Once legislation comes in. Yeah, so here's the thing. A lot of people push back and they say, but I'm supposed to hold this for the ATO for 7 years, right? What you need to hold for the ATO is the transactional information, not the information of the actual tenant. You can go beyond this 3 years if there is reasonable evidence that you need to hold on to that information. So that might be because you've got a tribunal hearing that has been ongoing, you've got some other kind of legal problem, something like that that is viable for you to hold on to the information. As long as you can prove it, you can keep it for more than 3 years.
Property goes to another agent and they want a copy of application, this, that, everything else, but nothing to hand over.
But it's after the tenant's moved out. So you wouldn't still have that information if it's going over to another agent. You wouldn't need to provide that.
So when you say you've got to hold on to transactional information, but not tenants' information, like all the information you've got on Property Me, their phone numbers, their emails, we can hold that on Property Me? It's just their application forms and rental agreements? Or?
What you've got to do is you've got to de-identify it. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to protect people's privacy from someone coming along later and going, oh, thanks very much, I'll just grab this person's identity and I'll just take it and sell it on the dark web. So that's what they're trying to capture, because I can tell you now, again, companies that I've been into that have got tenants from 20 years ago still floating around in the paper files that no one uses anymore, but no one's actually gone in and got rid of them. So that's one thing absolutely to be careful of. You've also only got 30 days for a rejected application. So you want to be careful that information isn't sitting around in your files from perhaps a tenant who was approved. So you created the little file and you sucked out their application form and all their information and you put that into your file in G Drive, or you put it into Property Me or whatever. Then the tenant decides, no, I've decided I'm not going to move in anymore. You got 30 days to get rid of that information. So my suggestions on things like that, we're updating all the communication from 60 days to 90 days within your organisation to make sure that the clients are getting the right details around termination notices. We're going to train the sales team to be aware that we now have to give 90 days notice when a tenant for a sale of a property, not 60. Because we spent so long drumming the 60 days into them, and now we've got to give them a 50% increase. 30? 30%. 50%. Yeah, I was right. See, I doubted myself then. Okay. Don't download application forms until such time as the tenant's actually moved in or they've paid. Because then it's not your problem. If you haven't downloaded it, the problem sits with Ignite, it sits with Inspect Real Estate, it sits with them because they're the ones who are holding the data, not you. And create a procedure for the disposal. Make sure someone in your organisation, again, this is the key actions, allocate one person to review and action it on a regular basis. So it might be every 30 days they go into the system and they have a look at properties that have been excluded or whatever, or people that didn't, that weren't approved, make sure that there's no evidence of them in your files whatsoever. Because if you, it's getting hot again, isn't it? If you get audited and this information gets found, there's not going to be a get out of jail.
Not inspection.
Well, it's de-identifying the information, and they do specifically refer to application forms. Yeah, so they're the ones that they're concerned about. Sending emails out to renters advising them that their information has been deleted within these timeframes. So whether there's something that you can set up in IRE or, Property Me or whatever it is, thanks very much for vacating the property. By the way, your information has been disposed of. Or in 3 years' time, we've just gone through and we've just disposed of all your information, and we just want to let you know that it's been done. And engaging with IRE, SNUG, etc., to make sure that they are the ones who are deleting the applications. Okay. I was actually going to run into minimum standards. We've got so much to get through. This really is. These are the things that have not been given a date yet, but were in the housing statement from the government. So these are things they still want to bring through.
Fixed cooling systems.
So think about within your organisation how we're handling those, how we're handling that communication to the clients to actually say to them, these things are coming, my friend. So how about we get ready for them? Especially the air conditioners, upgrading of your hot water services, etc. It's time for you to be mindful of those things, because if something happens to the hot water service and it's one of those, one of the old type, and you replace it with like, and then you've got a situation where the new legislation comes in, then the owner's going to say, well, why didn't I just get it done that way in the first place? Why have I got... They do offer rebates, absolutely. They're not going to come in and force you to remove the new hot water service. Let me stress that. So if you've had it done on Wednesday, then the new legislation drops the following Thursday, you're not going to have to remove that unit. But the client may well miss out on rebates, and it may also make it harder for them to lease the property because you've got renters who are coming in going, oh, well, hang on a minute, this is a gas unit. I don't want a gas unit. So just think about those things. Start having those conversations with your clients. Oh, I think that's going to be a huge one. Absolutely. When you're talking about apartment blocks that are 3 or 4 stories high that don't have a balcony, and you want to install an air conditioning system, you can put them on little brackets out the side of the property, which looks so ugly. And then you've got to pay someone. Yeah, but then you've got to pay someone on a cherry picker every time you want to get maintenance done on it. So it wasn't thought through. It's a nice idea, but I don't think it was thought through. Well, this is the whole thing.
Our teams are going to be a lot busier selling expensive properties.
So many sales coming up for you. Look at it that way. Exactly. Couple of last things. The rental non-compliance list. I'm sure you're all aware of this. If you are not, this is what VCAT can register your residential rental provider on this list if they breach certain sections of the Act, one of them being compliance, and they have to remedy a breach, pay compensation, etc. The kicker is that you as the agent also gets registered, which we do not want. When we're spending all our time trying to get favourable Google reviews, we do not want our name on that register. So this is, again, why I'm saying if you've got clients who are not doing the right thing, kick them to the curb. That's a 60 penalty unit fine, by the way, which is close enough to $12,000. Okay, so what are the communications like with our residential rental providers? Updating routine inspections to alert clients of the age of appliances is something else that you can do because they have compliance plates. and internal escalation if a residential rental provider isn't doing what they should. Blue sky stuff, you can offer professional audits on properties to understand where the gaps are. Information nights, webinars, EDMs, communications out to your clients, letting them know these things are coming. So they have the time also to start saving the money that they are going to need in order to upgrade their property. And an asset register for all properties. There's a number of systems that actually have asset registers. And I'll grab it, thanks. So you can actually start recording everything. Sorry, thank you. So you can actually start recording the types of, hot water service, et cetera, it's all in one spot. It's very easy. And if they come through, if they get updated or anything, then you've got the information there and you can just update it and you can make sure your asset register is constantly updated. There's a few systems that do it as well. So, yep.
If a landlord is prolonging maintenance, like major maintenance, like the ceiling's leaking, right? And there's a rent increase in place and the tenancy turns around and says, I'm not paying the rent increase until the maintenance is done.
Yep. The tenant, well, okay, under the legislation, the tenant does not have the right to refuse to pay rent. But if they're refusing to pay the rent increase part, is that what you're saying, or no rent at all?
Correct, the rent increase.
Okay, it's going to take a long time to get over 14 days on that one, to be able to make an application to VCAT to get possession of the property because they're more than 14 days in arrears. What I would suggest to the renter is have a quiet conversation with them and say, you have more control over this situation than I do. Make an application to VCAT under urgent repairs because the property is not structurally sound if it's letting water in. So I have done that so many times to explain to people, I can't do anything. You can. So do it. Because the other thing is if they try to come back and try and claim compensation later on, sorry? Yeah, but who asks you about that kind of stuff? And wouldn't you could volunteer it as well. So if you were giving a reference to someone, did they make an application to VCAT? Actually, they did. And you know what? I'm glad they did. I told them to do it because the owner did X, Y, Z, and we wanted to help them out. So you've got the tenant's got to mitigate their loss. So they should be making these applications as quickly as possible. Okay, a couple of final things. Resident rental dispute resolution Victoria. Who's been? Yeah? How was it? Yeah?
Much preferred it because they offer a mediation.
Yes.
And then even when we were going to go, so the owner didn't agree. And then even when we were going to go into the hearing, the member actually took the owner in before the tenant and said, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is what you're going to get if you come in here.
That was the mediator that did that?
No, the member actually did that. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it was really good. It kind of like gave the owner an opportunity to say, okay, I'm getting a better offer here.
Yep.
Yep. So.
Fantastic. Anyone else been? Anyone else want to give some feedback about the experience? No? Okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay. We were going to talk about communicating with your RRP, but we're at 12 people. So, and I think it's pretty obvious what we're talking about when we're actually wanting to communicate and methods to communicate with your clients. But just make sure that you are communicating. The whole change management piece, communication is going to get that through more healthily and easier for you than if you just throw it at someone and go, there you go, have some forced change. Bye. Never kind of works out. So just a few things that you can do. We were going to script it. I've got to pull that. And informed conversations. So are we giving people options? Do we know what we're talking about? Do we have the information in front of us when we're having these conversations with the clients? So we sound like the trusted advisor. We sound like the person who knows everything. We sound like the person that they come to when they have a question because we know what needs to be done. That's the relationship you want to have with your clients. And that is the relationship the client wants to have with you because they are paying you for a service and they want that service to be as seamless and as helpful as possible. So the more we give them, the better the relationship, the easier your life is. And at some point you can go through and jack up your fees as well because you're so amazing. So I love legislation change. There's a couple of people who don't love it as much as me, but that's fine. And the last thing, we want to tell our clients what is going on. Because if Henry Ford had have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So we need to tell our clients what needs to be done. That is our professional responsibility. Okay. That is it from me, beautiful people. Thank you so much. Of course.
Talk to me about statement of information. What we've had on our rental app is a link which takes them to that statement of information document, right?
It's gone.
When it opens that document,
My pleasure. See you later.
like there's nothing on there. 'Cause it looks like a statement of information that you would typically have a sales agent complete, right? What statement of information document or link are we supposed to be?
On Consumer Affairs. But who do you use for your applications?
Ignite.
Yep.
Or old school people that want to do manual ones. We've got an editable PDF one that we can email them and hand them.
Okay. Is the statement of information on that?
Maybe I need to look at that.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it needs to be provided to the renter at the point where they complete the application.
So Ignite should already have that as standard.
Ignite has it.
Standard.
Unless they've taken it out, but I'm pretty sure it was there.
So I'll check Ignite.
Yep.
Failing that, go on to CAV.
Yep.
And I'm
Or just Google